What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. Pardon me. It's Monday, January 15th, 2018. Start of a whole brand new week. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone. You'll have to forgive my voice. I'm still on the tail end of this bug. The malady definitely is lingering on. And I'm getting much better. Claire, unfortunately, still dealing with her back. And, we're taking her to the chiropractor again on Wednesday. Today is Martin Luther King Day, national holiday, and along with all the celebrations, it's worth going back and looking at what Martin Luther King Jr. accomplished, read some of his speeches, and also look at how viciously the FBI went after him at a time when the White House did not want the civil rights movement to make any more progress because it was aligning with the anti-war movement. So it's worth looking at that. And don't forget, the King family actually filed a civil lawsuit and held a trial, and the jury unanimously concluded that Dr. Martin Luther King was killed by a conspiracy of multiple individuals, not just the crazed lone nut James Earl Ray, who spent his entire life in prison denying that he'd done it. Obviously, by now you've heard that Saturday we had a false alarm on our emergency management system here in Hawaii, and it did get a little crazy for a while. I'm just here at home. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and watching a little TV, and all of a sudden the emergency warning system comes up. And normally when that comes on up, it's because there's a storm coming in or a tsunami or something else like that. In this case, we got the message, ballistic missile headed toward Hawaii, seek shelter immediately. This is no drill. And I'm going, what? And I'm listening out the window because a couple of months ago they set up that nuclear attack warning siren system, and it was not sounding. It was quiet. So I switched the TV to a local TV news channel, nothing. Turn on a radio to my favorite radio news station, nothing. And so the first thing I'm thinking is, this was a hack job. Somebody hacked on into the system just to have a little fun with this, and I posted an article to What Really Happened saying somebody's played a nasty joke on Hawaii. Then all of a sudden, the sirens down around the base at Pearl Harbor, they started to go off. And at that point, Claire and I thought this might actually be real, and Republic Broadcasting is going to have to find a new on-air talent in the immediate future. And when they say seek shelter immediately, they mean shelter in place. Well, we're in our home, but it's not like it's any protection against a nuclear attack. And fortunately, a few minutes later, the TV news came on saying, no, it's all a mistake. It's all huge, big mistake. But a lot of people did panic, running out of buildings, getting down into the basement of concrete parking structures. Any building that had a basement, the people were flooding into that. There's a video of a Hawaii family actually putting their kids down into the storm drain system. Just took off the manhole cover, person hole cover, apologize to the liberals, and they put the kid down in there. And there was a high degree of panic. The pastor of Claire's church said that he had hidden out in his closet with his wife and his dog for about 5 minutes, and then eventually they got the word this had been a false alarm. Now, the official story is that the user interface on the Hawaii Emergency Management System is not well designed. And it literally has a pull-down menu with two items. One is Test Missile Alert, and the second one is Send Missile Alert. And apparently somebody just hit that wrong menu item, and it was gone. And it happened just as the shift was changing. So the person who had sent the message got up out of his chair and was heading out and didn't realize he'd done it until his own phone started singing the message. So Emergency Management Agency got out about 15 minutes after it happened, posted an alert on their board. But for some reason, it took 38 minutes for the Emergency Management Agency to send out a corrected message. And for most people, that's when they first found out this was all a hoax. So that was a very long 38 minutes for a lot of people. I understand a lot of drivers were heading up the H2 to the north part of the island at very high speed, and HPD's handing out speeding tickets like crazy. But it was very, very, very serious. Now, they're still not identifying the person who did this. They're saying it's an honest mistake. They're not going to be fired, but they are going to be reassigned. But I think if this story is true, there needs to be like a second checkbox. Are you sure you want to send out the missile alert? I mean, it takes 2 clicks to completely empty the trash on my desktop. Why isn't that kind of a safety built into the system? I imagine that it will be in the very near future. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're talking about Saturday's false alarm of a ballistic missile threat coming into Hawaii. And it did thankfully turn out to be a false alarm, but for some people, for as long as 38 minutes, they thought it was the real deal. And apparently people are so angry that Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency is actually getting death threats. People are very angry. And just along with the anger is the fact they've destroyed their own credibility. The next time there's an emergency alert, we won't know if it's real or not. So that is a big problem. Now, there are 2 good things that have come out of this. And the first is that those Hawaiians who were not preparing to survive a nuclear attack are now preparing. And this little survival company we know up there over by the Tony Autoplex, I'm sure he's doing a land office business right now. The second thing to come out of this, and I hope it's felt as strongly on the mainland as it is here in Hawaii, nuclear war just went from an abstract concept to something concrete, something that could really happen. Because people were walking around saying, wow, this just got real. Nuclear war, and people are going to die, our state's going to be destroyed. And maybe out of this scare, people are going to wake up and start demanding the government stop this reckless path to war with North Korea, with Iran, with Russia, with China, before we get these alerts for real. And I hope you'll join me in on that because, again, we only thought it was real for about maybe 5 minutes. But for a lot of people, it was 38 minutes. And it did feel real. We really, for 5 minutes there, we thought our lives were over. And that is definitely going to color your perceptions. Okay, article coming out of Natural News, 3 life-changing lessons to learn from Hawaii's false ballistic missile warning. And basically lesson number 1 is the government is beyond incompetent. Yeah. And they blew it. They absolutely blew it. And they were basically having a drill, and they hit the wrong button, and the software did not have a second safety to say, are you really sure you want to do this? Second lesson is that people lose their minds, and almost nobody is prepared for anything unexpected. Because let's be honest, in all of this rhetoric against North Korea, and it was toning down lately. And so people are saying, no, they couldn't come here, they couldn't come. Well, you know, they've got a missile that can reach the mainland now, and that means they can reach Hawaii. And there isn't much you can do to prepare here in Hawaii because pretty much everything is congealed lava, and digging a fallout shelter or a bomb shelter is extraordinarily difficult. But, you know, obviously having prepper supplies, that's a good thing. And all of a sudden, all the local people who were making fun of prepping, they're not laughing anymore. They're realizing it could get real. And then finally, basically, question number 3, it's time to start thinking. What are you going to do if there is a nuclear war with North Korea, with China, with Russia? Now, North Korea's nuclear weapons so far are very small, so there's a good chance the vast majority of people on Oahu would survive the attack. If the attack hit Pearl Harbor, we'd lose our windows and a couple of other things. But further away, Honolulu, the North Shore, they would be just fine. Unfortunately, Russia and China have far larger warheads. A Russian strike on Pearl Harbor, Claire and I would not survive that. The Chinese, because their missiles are not as accurate, they go for really big warheads. And just one of them, their standard nuclear missile warhead, would literally melt this entire island into green glass. And I used to tell that to people, and it was like, again, an abstraction. Now, all of a sudden, it's real. And I can imagine that probably the week before Pearl Harbor happened, there was actually a warning in the newspaper that Japan was going to attack. And I have to imagine that the people back then, during that week before the attack actually came, they were feeling the same way. It went from being something that was happening far away to something very real and very present. The other thing Hawaiians are now aware of is what it's like to be a Palestinian and live under the constant threat of bombs from above. Now, since we're on the subject, we need to go back and look at the Trump administration's nuclear policy review, because it actually makes nuclear war more likely. It's authorizing the use of nuclear weapons in response to non-nuclear attack. It's pushing the idea of preemptive strikes. It's authorizing a whole new generation of small, what are called usable nuclear weapons, little tiny ones, as opposed to the big city busters. So once again, we're in a nuclear arms race, and we're building more and more of those warheads. And yet, if the United States or Russia were to detonate 10% of the existing stockpile, there would be enough radiation to exterminate all life on Earth. We let the nuclear genie out of the bottle, and we better find a way to get him back in, because we really are playing with an extinction-level event. Now, Hawaii's Representative Tulsi Gabbard is out there blaming the U.S. government for all this tension with North Korea that had everybody primed and ready to panic when that alert went out. And she's absolutely right. The U.S. is the aggressor here. The U.S. has been provoking North Korea, as it provokes so many other countries. North Korea has made it very clear. Their nuclear arsenal is aimed only at the United States of America. They're not targeting South Korea. They're not targeting Japan. They're not targeting Russia or China. North Korea sees the United States as an existential threat. And we need to back off of this. I was hoping that maybe our false alarm might get Trump thinking, but apparently the only thing he tweeted out was a reminder that this was a failure of a state agency, not a federal agency. Speaking of a federal agency, one little interesting thing came out of this story. Apparently, one of the reasons it took 38 minutes for the Emergency Management Agency to get the retract message out was they had to consult with FEMA. And maybe they were making sure there really wasn't a missile coming in, but it could have been done a lot faster. And I think that's what people are so angry about. First of all, the mistake was made that scared everybody. And second of all, that it was allowed to go on for as long as it did. Somebody should have just sat down at the keyboard the second after that message went out and said, sorry, false alarm, testing system was a goof. 38 minutes long. Okay, now, Maxine Waters is out there on the warpath, demanding that racist, flawed, unfit, ignorant, hopeless bigot Donald Trump be impeached for name-calling. She was out there on Meet the Press just screaming her head off. And Maxine, there is a reality of life that you are going to have to come to accept. Name-calling is not an impeachable offense. Being racist is not an impeachable offense. We've had a lot of racist presidents. But they're just out there. But, you know, the good news is, the more you have people like Maxine Waters out there just ranting and raving, the more sane it makes Donald Trump look in comparison. And everybody's still arguing about what he said in this immigration meeting without really paying attention to the substantive issues of the meetings. But let's not forget, back in 2013, during a debate in the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Lindsey Graham called Mexico and other Latin American nations hellholes, and nobody said anything about it. Nobody said anything about it. The outrage is just being very, very selective. It's got to be very rough for Donald Trump to realize he's surrounded by people and a corporate media and politicians who are spending every waking moment waiting for Donald Trump to say or do something that can be turned against him. It's amazing here. Now, as you know, Senator David Perdue, when he was on ABC News last week, he repeatedly said the meeting had been grossly and totally misrepresented in the press, and standing in stark contrast with Senator Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham, who are out there saying that, yes, Trump did use that exact phrase, but this other senator who was there saying, no, he doesn't recall Trump using that exact wordage. But again, the wordage isn't the issue. The issue is the open borders policy and getting a more responsible immigration system set up. Now, they're all up in a fury over DACA. And they're saying it's probably not going to happen. Trump is out there saying the Democrats don't want it to happen. They're talking about a shutdown Friday. And you need to remember something. When Barack Obama set up DACA, he said it was temporary. When he wrote the executive order, he said, now let's be clear. This is not amnesty. It is not immunity. This is not a path to citizenship. This is not a permanent fix. This is a temporary stopgap measure. Well, it's been a lot of years, and it doesn't seem to have really eased the problem of illegal immigration. So it was temporary. Let's let it go. Now, Rosemary Jenks, who is Director of Government Affairs for Numbers USA, in an interview with Breitbart News said, Democrats have an interest in maintaining the status quo on immigration to ensure future Democratic voters. They are now out there admitting it. They pried the borders open. They're not going to let them be shut. They're bringing in all these people to vote Democratic this November, even though as non-U.S. citizens they're not supposed to vote. But this is why the Democrats keep fighting against voter ID laws. They need all those illegal immigrants and those refugees to vote for them, because there are over 30 Republican members of the House of Representatives who have announced they're not going to run again. They want to move on to other things. There's a lot of open seats, and the Democrats could take the House of Representatives. And if they have a majority in the House of Representatives, yeah, they can vote through articles of impeachment. It may not hold up in the Senate, but they're out to get Trump any way that they can. So Lewandowski is out there saying basically exactly the same thing, that there's going to be a real problem in government if the Democrats take back control of the House, which they're unfortunately at this point expected to do, because it would be not just the threat of an impeachment over some kind of trumped-up charge, and I notice they're still out there pushing Russian collusion despite the absence of any evidence, but they will be obstructionists. They're not going to let Donald Trump do anything or change anything, because that's what they want to campaign on in 2020. Look at all the promises Donald Trump made, and he didn't carry out any one of them. So that's what's going on. We're going to take a break here now for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I was watching the feed on Fox News, and they ran a blurb for Tucker Carlson's show tonight, and it looks like he's taking on this issue about deliberately flooding the country with illegal immigrants in order to swing the election toward the Democrats. And it is a serious problem, and they're committing a crime. they're committing two crimes. They commit one crime when they step across that border without the appropriate paperwork, and they commit the second crime when they vote in our elections, because non-citizens are not allowed to vote. That's why there's supposed to be a voter ID. I mean, the Democrats, in the name of hanging on to power, are selling out the laws of this country. They're literally selling the country itself out to all these imported voters. They'll take anybody. MS-13 gang members, contagious, psychotics, people fleeing prosecution for crimes. Now, according to an article that we have out of Breitbart, if the Democrats were to take control of the House this November, it's an absolute sure thing they would vote Nancy Pelosi back into the speakership. And I think a lot of people would be very afraid of that, given some of the displays of lack of clarity in her speech recently, especially because as Speaker of the House, she's third in line in the presidential succession. If both the President and Vice President are incapacitated, the Speaker of the House assumes the Oval Office, and there is a scary thought. Now, Jeff Bezos is out there. He's all in favor of DACA, and he's getting ready to donate $33 million in college scholarships to DACA students. Does it not anger you that these refugees and immigrant students are being given scholarships while American students are forced to go to student loans to go to school? That does not strike me at all as being fair. Article over here in Zero Hedge, David Stockman, basically saying that the Democrats are becoming the party of the immigrant, of the refugee, of the Muslim. And we've seen them. They've literally gone on a warpath, demonizing conservative white people. We're the enemy now. And Stockman is concerned with, unfortunately, a little justification, that this whole situation could eventually morph into a racial, ethnic, civil war on the soil of this country. I would hate to see that happen. Now, getting into the domestic political situation. Remember a while back, Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson had sort of justified the dossier, the Russian dossier, by saying that the FBI had a source inside the Trump campaign who verified much of the information. And he testified before Congress with that, and he repeated the claim in a New York Times op-ed on January 2nd. But today, Fusion GPS is retracting that statement, saying that Simpson mischaracterized the source. In other words, there is no corroboration. It was all just made up. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Doesn't seem like the story adds up about that Hawaii missile thing on a couple of fronts, but it seems to me like they could have just as easily said, went ahead and pushed the button for the drill and had a second message go out. But the other thing that they've done by going to these, I don't know, you've probably heard it, when these emergency activation notification networks, EAN or whatever they're calling it now, used to be the old EBS system. You had human beings at every stage of the game. You know, you'd have a master regional station or a 911 center or something would send out these dispatches, and every time a station down the line got one, they would have to decide whether it applied to their area or not and rebroadcast it. They've increasingly automated this, and you'll hear the modem sounds when these go off. If you listen to the weather radio, you hear the like whatever it's called. There's a nickname for it, but it just sounds like an old dial-up modem sort of. It's
well, it is a modem. It's not a telephone computer modem. It is for maritime radios with the digital capacity. And so along with the vocal report, they're also getting a text report. Now, our emergency system here in Hawaii does have zones. because if there's a storm coming on in, only the area that's going to be affected by the storm gets the notification. They don't alert the entire state for anything like that. But in this case, the entire state did get the alert. And part of the problem was it happened right at a shift change. And the other part of the problem is, for whatever reason, the Emergency Management Agency had to go to FEMA, which doesn't have a reputation for extreme speed, before they sent out the retraction. But I'm in agreement with you. If they had just, the instant they realized they'd done it, if they'd sent out the retraction, all would have been well. Mike, we got to take another break for commercials here. I'm going to ask you to stay on the line, and I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Mike in Kentucky. We're talking about Saturday's false alarm and why it was allowed to go on for 38 minutes before a retraction was sent out over that same emergency notification system. Somebody is trying to kookify the whole story by putting out the claim that there really was a ballistic missile inbound. Had it hit, it was to be blamed on North Korea, but the missile either failed or was shot down, and they just decided to hush the whole thing up. But again, the reason I didn't panic when I saw the notification was because the siren system wasn't going at that time, and there was nothing on the local TV news or local radio news. And if there had been a real threat, everybody would have been notified, everybody would have been talking about it. So it's somebody else just having fun and putting out fake news to make us all look silly. So, Mike, you got anything else you want to share with us?
Well, do you have a weather radio?
Yes,
Wednesday,
I do.
They test those weather radios, and every now and then I don't get to see them, but there's a banner that'll pop up usually on Wednesdays. If it's a fair weather day, you can listen sometime after 11 a.m. local time and sometime before about 1 o'clock. You'll hear that old legacy tone from beep, the EBS tone that goes off for like 20 seconds or something, and then you'll hear those modem sounds like I'm talking about. And then on the cable or some TV stations, you'll see a banner pops up and it says, a station in the network is doing a required weekly test.
Yeah, we get that here.
So,
we get that here.
Right. So that system they could have used. We had an incident that, as far as I know, has never been explained here, where we got a weird message across the cable, and I started getting calls saying, "What's going on?" And it said the interstate's going to be closed from 3:05 to 3:17, and I said that's very unusual. And it was announced like 3 or 4 hours early. I think it was like 11 or 12 o'clock on a Friday or some odd day when they wouldn't have been testing it. And so I started calling around, and sure enough, some other stations had got the message and chose not to broadcast it because it was not in their market. But the Weather Service never got it, and one of the main radio stations around here, did not get it. But within a couple of hours, or not even a couple of hours, I got a call back from a local 911 center and says, "What is this you're putting out about the interstate being closed?" And I said, "I'm not putting it out. People called me asking about it." And I said, "I can't originate such messages like that." But if you remember, there was a TV show, Dark Angel, when the Sci-Fi first launched with Jessica Alba and Michael Weatherly, I think, the guy that's called Bull on TV right now. Anyway, that's one of the things he was doing, was hacking into the emergency broadcast system in that show. He played a guy in a wheelchair, and he was always putting out his manifesto using that system. And this, I think, is prime evidence. They've got all their eggs in one basket with this one computer, which is hackable.
Hold it, Mike.
If you believe William Benny.
Mike, it's not one computer. It's a whole bunch of linked computers. Origination is guaranteed. We know where the problem began, and we know who did it. I mean, we're not being told the guy's name, only that he's being reassigned. And our system here in Hawaii works the way you describe. On television sets, there's a banner that pops up at the top. There are 3 loud klaxon-type sounds, and then there's a synthetic voice that basically reads the message for the vision-impaired people. And That's how it works. And on portable electronic devices, tablets and cell phones, you'll get a pop-up and an alert sound as well. And it works very, very rapidly. So, and again, there was no hack. There was no missile attack. Somebody just hit the wrong menu item when they were running a drill, and the drill accidentally went live. Mike, thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go now and switch over to Steve Elkins in, Steve, yes, of course. I keep wanting to say you're in the city of Elkins. What's on your mind today?
Question is how Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning, could run for public office. You know, he's running for a senator seat in Maryland. How's that possible if you've been convicted and sentenced for espionage to be qualified to run? I would thought that would definitely invalidate him for being a possible running.
Did he get a pardon?
Espionage. Yeah, even though he was pardoned on his sentence. He was actually commuted the sentence.
Okay.
Which didn't pardon the crime itself.
You're right. That felony conviction says he can't run.
Right. And he's running, supposedly, correct?
Well, you know, these days the political parties just don't play by the rules anymore. But whoever's running against Manning, they need to make a big issue about this. That Manning was convicted of a felony. Well, you know something? I'm not sure. I know that the severity of crime varies depending upon the level of the office that you're going for, but I'm pretty sure that people convicted of a felony can't run for the Senate. I'll have to look that up on the next commercial break.
Now, how was Marion Barry allowed to run again? I thought he was charged with a felony, and he ended up going back into office, too, after his prison sentence. So, I don't know. I'm kind of confused between both those cases. It seemed to me he would not be able to run. Manny.
Yeah, I'll look into that on the next commercial break, okay?
All right. Hey, thanks, Michael. Appreciate
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Two things real quick. One of them, subject we already talked about. I think that was interesting about what you noticed there with the false alert there where you live and how the system didn't function normally.
Actually, the system functioned normally. The people running the system hit the wrong button and then took too long to fix the problem.
Well, you mentioned that usually the siren near your house goes off, and you didn't notice that. Do you recall what the usual instance is?
The sirens are a separate system. This system that happened on Saturday was the one that specifically sent out messages to electronic devices and television sets.
Okay, so in a normal test, do the sirens usually go off simultaneously at the base and at your place?
No,
at the same time?
No, the sirens are all tested on the first Monday of the month at 11:30 in the morning. You can hear them over the broadcast. That's the only time the sirens are tested, so we know automatically that it is a test. When they do the test of the emergency warning system over the electronic devices, that is run independently, and they don't run the sirens with it. You know, precisely so that people don't hear the warning tone and the sirens and think that something's going on. I'm still waiting to find out if anybody actually suffered physical harm on Saturday, if they got crushed in a crowd or if somebody had a heart attack, because that would be a major lawsuit right there.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's something like that took place. But one other point about that real quick. They're conveniently shielding whoever it was. I think they might be suffering. It's possible with all of this resentment and contempt for Donald Trump, because a lot of the comments that came in the aftermath of this have been anti-Trump. You know, they want to blame Trump for this. You know, because the automatic fear was linked to North Korea. You know. And so I wouldn't put it past, another one of these people with suffering from TDS deliberately doing something like that just to make him look bad. Now, getting on to my other topic, getting on with the vote fraud, didn't you report some time ago that the Republicans and Democrats actually have a deal in writing that they can't investigate each other?
No, it's actually only one way, and what it is, it's called a right of consent, and apparently there was a lawsuit some years ago involving election fraud, and apparently the Republicans got too aggressive in investigating the Democrats, and the Democrats sued, and as part of the final court settlement, the GOP actually has to have the permission of the Democratic National Committee to conduct any more investigations into voting integrity. It's utterly, utterly ridiculous. It's a license to steal elections by the Democrats.
Yeah, I guess possibly one reason why Trump shut down his investigation is somebody might have informed him about it and said, well, it's useless then.
No. The court order was only on the Republican Party. The president is a separate entity. Trump apparently just gave up. Apparently his Election Integrity Commission was being totally stonewalled by every state in the union, which tells us how widespread this election fraud problem has become. And he's supposedly turning it over to the Department of Homeland Security, but they're not going to do anything about it. You know, we the people have lost this country. We've lost any control over what this country is doing. The 17 years of constant wars prove it. We're living in a dictatorship. It's trying to pretend that it's still a republic, but it is a dictatorship.
You're absolutely right. And anyway, I forgot. That's a conspiracy theory. Anyway, aloha, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. The phone lines are now open. And getting on back to domestic politics and intrigues. We're into the intrigues. We need Twilight Zone theme music going here now. Apparently, John Podesta, Hillary's campaign manager, is now also popping up in the middle of Barack Obama's illegal spying on Trump and that phony dossier. And apparently Podesta was part of that chain that provided that dossier to FISA to request permission to spy on candidate Trump. And apparently the question is being raised if the dossier was used as support for Obama and Hillary spying on candidate Trump, or if it was used to obtain permission to spy on the Trump team after the spying was already in place to try and make it look legitimate. Now, both of these would be criminal acts due to the dossier being a fraud, and using the government to spy on political opponents it's criminal as well, and it's beyond belief. But I remember that this dossier showed up just after Donald Trump claimed to have found evidence of spying, surveillance, at his campaign headquarters. So I think the second version is what's going on. The spying was ongoing, and they came up with this Russian dossier and a FISA warrant to make it look like it was a legitimate criminal investigation and therefore could proceed. Now, John McCain has been identified as the person who ferried this bogus dossier over to the FBI. And it raises three questions. And the first question is, did McCain know about Fusion GPS playing the role in compiling the dossier? Because Fusion GPS does not have a record for accuracy. They're an opposition research firm, but a lot of what they come up with is just really well-written propaganda and hoaxes. And the second question basically is, did McCain know that this Trump dossier was funded by the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign? And finally, why did McCain feel he needed to provide the dossier to the FBI leadership in the first place? A lot of skullduggery going on over there. Now, apparently, last Friday, the Department of Justice finally turned over all documents related to the Russian dossier to the House Intelligence Committee. 1.2 million documents have been generated in trying to verify this Russian dossier or discredit it or just find out where it came from and where it went. So it looks like the House Intelligence Committee is finally starting to do a decent job over there. Now, last week we had this 11-count indictment handed down on Uranium-1. The indictment is against Mark Lambert. He's the former co-president of a Maryland-based transportation company that provides services for the transportation of nuclear material to customers in the United States and abroad. And he was indicted as part of the Uranium-1 bribery scheme, in his case, bribing a Russian official. But as it turns on out, this guy is a longtime associate of the Clintons and the Obama administration, and so it's all starting to come out. If this guy turns, if this guy sings, it's going to start coming apart here. Now, strange Clinton connections emerge after Uranium-1 indictment. Apparently, this same company also managed transport for megatons and megawatts program under Bill Clinton. So there's the Clinton connection to this guy who was part of the Uranium-1 deal. They can't say, we don't know him, we never had anything to do with him. All right, let's take a phone call. Jim in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha, Michael. Yeah, you know, I was just considering this alert that the state of Hawaii has to, you know, that would actually inform the citizens there if it's not a drill. You would think that the White House would receive that same message at the same instant.
No,
I mean,
because the message is not. No, because the message isn't coming from the top of the command structure, the top of the alert structure, which would be FEMA and the Pacific Command. Those are the two sources for these kind of warnings out here, is FEMA and the Pacific Missile Command. If they issued the alert, yes, the White House would get it immediately. But they didn't. This was a low-level technical goof that activated just one of the alert systems here in Hawaii. And there's no reason that Trump would get that message because his cell phone is not located within Hawaii.
Well, you think I don't know, it seems to me, though, if the state is detecting an incoming missile, that it would work the way back up.
The state didn't detect an incoming missile. There was no missile. The state did not detect an incoming missile. Somebody just hit the wrong button.
Okay, Michael, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to come up here on a commercial break. So I'm going to put off the next call until after the commercials here. By the way, as investigations crank up around the Clinton Foundation, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, getting on back to Chelsea Manning running for the Senate in Maryland. Apparently, the granting of clemency, pardon me for a second. Apparently, the granting of clemency restores your civil rights, including the right to run for office. And while supposedly a convicted felon loses their right to have guns, their ability to hold an office of public trust, apparently it's mostly left up to the states. And Maryland last year passed a law saying that, yes, a convicted felon can run for the Senate. So I guess Chelsea's on her way. And it's another reminder that we seem to have a government that's being overwhelmed by criminals. All right, let's take another phone call. Bao in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, what's going on? It's my first time actually checking this network out.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been listening to some of the things you're saying as far as the state of everything, and it has kind of a parasitic feel to it, doesn't it, Michael? Or
I'm sorry. What has a parasitic feel?
All of it. The government, what's going on, and you know, court systems.
Yes.
And
The government is a parasite. The government is a parasite. The government does not produce anything. It simply takes and redistributes and keeps a bit of it for itself.
Yeah, and and I don't know what it is, but you know how like you can feel energy sometimes, like when you're at a big event, you can like feel energy inside of a building.
Yes.
it's just, like, this whole environment I'm in just feels very parasitic to me as far as, you know, everything around me.
Okay. Well, I agree with you. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get on back here to the news. All right. As we started to say before the last commercial break, there is a new investigation into the Bill Hillary Clinton Foundation, and this may be a little bit more serious. Apparently, there were attempts to launch other investigations earlier, including a call for the IRS to look into the issue of whether they really qualify as a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. And the IRS just basically said, no, we're too busy going after the Tea Party people. But if this is a serious investigation, if things start to come on out, then there are some people out there who are going to have to start worrying, such as Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, because due diligence doesn't end when the Clinton charities cash your check. And Buffett and Gates and the other big donors may find themselves entangled with what the Clintons were really doing with that money. And we know that very little of it actually went to charity. We know that what they were doing down in Haiti was just shameful. In fact, James Woods just came on out on Twitter and said, "You looted Haiti like a peg-legged pirate." And he's absolutely right. Now, Bill Clinton has been triggered by allegations that the Clinton Foundation's Haiti funds were used for Chelsea Clinton's wedding, and he's out there saying it's a personal insult to me and to Chelsea and to Mark. Well, yeah, I imagine it would be. But, yeah, when you live your life like that, that's called the how dare you defense. But there's no public audit, and there needs to be. There needs to be accountability what happened to all that money. Okay, we're coming up here on the station identification break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. And just getting back on in here, I'm trying to help Claire deal with what she's dealing with, which is unfortunately bad. And we're taking her to the chiropractor again on Wednesday. I wish we could get her there sooner. All right, let's take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Doing
Mike,
okay.
you know, when I heard this thing about what happened in Hawaii there, I started thinking of, I love the Terminator movies because to me, there's a message to them. And every time I get a chance, I usually watch them. And I saw T3 the other day. And I was thinking right away, we keep on with artificial intelligence. I know this time it wasn't artificial intelligence, just stupidity.
Yes.
But we keep on counting on artificial intelligence, and we keep on revving up the tensions between the United States and Russia, especially where we each have 7,000 nukes apiece and the means of delivery. We're headed towards something like this one of these days. And if this causes this kind of panic with one missile supposedly on its way, just think if it really happened or how close it happened. And I heard that during the Cold War it almost happened then. So how we can use computers, man, these silos and stuff like that is beyond me. We're headed, T3 was made, I think the Terminator movies were made for a reason. I think, what's the guy's name that guy who put it together? I think he
James Cameron.
did it for warning. Huh?
James Cameron.
Right. I think James Cameron, right. I think he did it either for warning or he, maybe it's like they say with the Illuminati, the New World Order, they say, well, this is what we're going to do to you. What are you going to do? It's like, it's almost like a ritual that they're telling you what to do because these things are too close. I know the movie itself they're all entertaining. Schwarzenegger was great as the robot, but there's too much likelihood that, God forbid, this could really come true, especially now with artificial intelligence.
Well, first of all, at that stage in his career, James Cameron was making movies to make money, and that the original Terminator story was a very good one, and it did spawn that franchise. But secondly, artificial intelligence is still overblown. The machines, the software are they're very adaptive. They're self-learning to an extent. They're not sentient or aware or conscious, or certainly not in the way that we humans would understand that. And in any event, the computers are making fewer mistakes than the humans are. And that was certainly the case here. The alert system worked flawlessly. It was human error that set it off and scared all those people. And you're right, during the Cold War, there were a couple of near misses. We came very close during the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you've ever seen the movie War Games, that's based on something that actually did happen up at the SAC base underneath that mountain. And in the real event, there wasn't an outside hacker hacking in. Somebody put a training tape into the system without putting out the message, this is a training exercise. And all of these controllers saw their screens light up with images of Russian missiles coming in, and they got all the way to DEFCON 2 before they were finally able to realize what was going on. So, yeah, there have been a couple of near misses, and that's why there were some attempts to try and scale some of this stuff back because of just how close it was getting, but we seem to be going back in the wrong direction yet again.
I know these neocons, I think they're actually madmen. They seem to want to push us closer and closer.
Oh, yeah, they think a global war is going to be a lot of fun. They've got their bunkers. They've all prepped up. You know, if they make a mistake and the U.S. loses, well, they'll just go down underground for 6 months or so and come on up, and it's going to be a much roomier place without all those useless eaters around.
Well, so they can enjoy the radiation with it. But personally, I think we'll kill them before they get a chance to get into those bunkers.
Well, I think we ought to just let them go down to the bunkers and cement over the hatches.
Yeah, that might not be a bad thing either. But you know, it just boggles the mind because there's not going to be any winner in a war like that. Not only the U.S. and Russia would lose, but the whole world would lose because there wouldn't be much of a. I don't know how much of a planet we'd have left.
Well, it depends on how many of the nuclear. It depends on how many of the nuclear weapons are actually detonated. If they detonate all of them, then yeah, the party is definitely over. If they only detonate a few, well, look at how many bombs were set off during the above-ground testing phase in Nevada and over here in the Pacific, and they set off some very big ones. Russia set off a 50-megaton bomb. Mostly as a demonstration. It was never intended to actually be deployed. And that radiation is still floating around in the atmosphere if you've got the equipment to detect it. Plus now, of course, we're dealing with the mess that's pouring on out of Fukushima. And given enough time, we might not even need a nuclear war.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's just a nuclear winter alone. I don't believe that it would just be a few bombs going off. I believe a nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia would probably result in hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles being fired on both sides and with some total destruction. Because once you start firing one, and it just escalates. And,
that's the real danger.
That's
the real danger. I mean, we've got Pakistan and India making stink face at each other right now. One side is already threatening to go nuclear. If they start flinging nukes at each other nations could panic. Everybody could hit the button.
Yeah. And Paul Craig Roberts seems to think it would result in total annihilation. No, and I respect that guy a lot. I think
yes.
He's very smart, and he understands what's really happening. And he tells you the power of one of these bombs that either U.S. or Russia has. There's one bomb that Russia has that one of them would take out like the entire New York State. 3 of them would take out the entire East Coast. So I mean, we're playing with fire, and it's a shame we can't get these politicians back and a deep state under our control, because they're going to kill us all to keep stuff. And that's the thing of it. That's when you watch something like T3 or T2, or T1, any Determinator movies, it really gives you good food for thought. I know that the other is The Matrix. There's also, that was just artificial intelligence taking over in the nuclear war. But, the Terminators were all about that, artificial intelligence starting nuclear war. Whether I know they're probably not up to that point yet, but I think it's coming where you will have artificial intelligence being able to,
it doesn't take artificial intelligence. It doesn't take artificial intelligence. A circuit failure can send a false alarm, and that's been known to have happened at least twice, which fortunately somebody in the line said, wait a minute, this doesn't look right, and they basically held off doing anything about it.
Hey, by the way, give Clara my best for me, okay? Is she recovered at least from the flu that she had?
Yeah, she's recovered from the flu, but it's that when she was coughing during the flu, she messed up her back, and it's just taking way too long to get better, and she's in a lot of pain. And she went to the chiropractor last Thursday. She's going again on Wednesday, and he warned her that getting things back in, it was going to be very painful. And I think pain management is what's needed now. So I'm trying to get her to go back to the doctor and get some more pain medication. But she's heard all these horror stories about opiate overdoses, and it's like my wife is behaving like a Christian Scientist with appendicitis.
What did she throw? A disc out of place?
It's a vertebra out of place down in the lumbar. And I'm going to be talking with the chiropractor on Wednesday. I didn't go the last time because her appointment was during the radio show. But Wednesday, I'll get a detailed explanation of what's going on. She's not showing any of the symptoms that would indicate a ruptured disc. So I think it's just a vertebra out of line, and it's thrown the whole lower back into total muscle spasm. So, I just want her to get better. This is, very hard for her, and it's hard for me to watch.
Okay, like I said, just give her my best, all right?
I certainly will. All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, getting on back to all these people who are saying we should remove Donald Trump with the 25th Amendment because he's obviously mentally ill, and there are all these psychologists who've been interviewed saying, oh, yes, he's showing the symptoms of this and the symptoms of that. Turns out one of the people quoted in the media doesn't even have a current license to practice, just trying to grab some attention. But the American Psychiatric Association has issued a warning to all these left-wing psychiatrists to stop diagnosing President Trump without a medical examination, because that is a total violation of medical ethics. And basically, if they're diagnosing President Trump and they've not performed a medical examination, they could lose their license. Now, a little bit of bad news. Trey Gowdy has resigned from the House Ethics Committee. And basically he's saying the workload is too great. He wants to focus on some of the other committees where he's doing some really good work helping to dig out the corruption. But he's going to step down from the ethics panel. But he's not going away. All right, let's start talking about the war zones. A lot of them out there, a lot of stuff going on. Fox News is still going on about Saturday's false flag. We're still big news. Okay. Down in Syria, the U.S. coalition is apparently planning to create a large new border force of 30,000 personnel with the aid of its militia allies. Looks like they're trying to create a new front. This border force will certainly infuriate Turkey, who's already angry over Washington's strong support for Kurdish-dominated forces in the Arab country, although the U.S. certainly backed off that last effort to form an independent Kurdistan over in Iraq. Now then, Syria considers this border security force a blatant aggression. And yes, they're absolutely right, because the United States does not have the permission of the Syrian government to be in Syria. The United States does not have a Security Council resolution to be in Syria. So, yes, U.S. forces anywhere in Syria represent an aggression. You have invaded a sovereign foreign nation with military assets. That's aggression. That's exactly what's going on here. Now, Erdogan vows to drown the U.S.-backed Syrian border force before it's born. He's calling it a terrorist army. And this is payback for support of the Kurds, payback for the botched coup d'etat. So we may see that heating up. It's a very, very dangerous time on planet Earth. And again, everybody who was here in Hawaii who went through that alert, I think it's changed our thinking about wars. My thinking has always been against war and against nuclear war. But just that idea, for just a few minutes, for some people 38 minutes, we all thought it was real. We all thought there was a nuclear weapon coming on in and it was going to be over. All right, let's take another phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
If felons couldn't run for office, then re-election wouldn't be possible. Because legislatures are kind of like prison. If you weren't a criminal going in, you are by the time you've been there a few years.
Well, I want to research this a little bit more because apparently, while you're serving time for your felony, well, it depends on state to state. But as far as the presidency, when I looked it up online, they're saying that yes, a convicted felon who has served their sentence can run for the presidency, and of course that opens up a possibility that Hillary could actually face criminal action for her crimes this year and still make a run in 2020, although I can't imagine Americans voting for somebody convicted of these crimes, especially if espionage is among them. But for all these immigrants and refugees who are coming on in, they'll vote Democrat, and it doesn't matter what the candidate actually did. Plus all the election fraud.
Right. I don't think even the Dems would be dumb enough to go for that. But and actually, I was joking, in the first place about the re-election thing. But that was a selling joke. But anyway, about for suggestions for Claire, for as someone experienced in L2-3 and left sacroiliac back pain.
Yep.
TENS units can be remarkably effective. Although we want to make judicious use of them, we can't leave them on for real long periods of time, or eventually they.
Okay, what was that? What was that you were talking about?
TENS. TENS.
Oh yes. We have a TENS unit. We just haven't gotten around to trying it. We've been doing a bunch of other stuff, lidocaine cream, Salon Pass, and a bunch of other stuff as well. But yes, we do have a TENS unit that I need to slap on her.
Oh, absolutely. It can be very effective. And the other thing is an inversion table, such as heater hang-ups.
Yes.
Okay, you don't have to go way upside down. You can set it so that it's only going 10 or 20 degrees below the horizontal, and it's tremendously therapeutic.
Well, I used to have one many years ago, and I loved it. Unfortunately, Claire reacts very negatively for her head being lower than her body. It just totally freaks her out, so that wouldn't work.
That's a shame. Maybe she could close her eyes or something. Because even if you just go 10 or 20 degrees below the horizontal, it's very, very helpful. I don't know. She may want to give it a try because it really, really helps. So, all right.
Well, I'll talk to her about it. I'll talk to her about it because, what I'll do is Wednesday when we're seeing the chiropractor, I'll bring the subject up in front of him and see what he says. Right.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to go, way far upside down, but even, like I say, 10 degrees can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
You can set it.
I'm familiar with it. I had one many years ago, and I liked it, and I would go full vertical. I don't know that I would do that now at my age, but yes, I did like it. It did help my back, and I was in the process of recovering from my own back injury, which was, again, solved by chiropractic. Okay, well, Glenn, thanks an awful lot for the suggestions, and I'm going to let you go. Getting over to Yemen, a United Nations panel has compiled a report of the civilian casualties caused by the Saudi military and its allies, saying that the Riyadh-led coalition has used precision-guided munitions in its raids on civilian targets. In other words, these civilian targets are being bombed intentionally. It's not a mistake. They're using these precision-guided munitions. They know where they're going. The United Nations is also warning that Yemen could become the world's worst humanitarian disaster in half a century. The country is grappling with deadly cholera and diphtheria outbreaks and the devastating Saudi war. Now, remember a while back, King Solomon grabbed a bunch of Saudi Arabian billionaires, put them up at the Ritz-Carlton, accused them all of corruption, and then said, if you will give us a portion of your fortune, because King Solomon's in a cash crunch, you can go home. And a lot of the billionaires went for it, but apparently Prince Al-Walid refused to do so. He was supposed to pay $6 billion for his freedom, and now he's been moved from the Ritz-Carlton to the highest security Saudi prison, Al-Hair prison south of Riyadh. This is getting into real Game of Thrones kind of stuff here. Now, apparently Kashmiri Muslims are protesting against the killing of civilians by Indian forces during what is called an anti-insurgency operation in Srinagar. And I'm sorry to see that war has come to Srinagar. There's an important archaeological artifact there. All right, we have to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about, pardon me, goings-on between India and Pakistan. Apparently, the Indian Army earlier today carried out what they're calling a retaliatory action against Pakistan, killing 7 soldiers and injuring 4 others. Now, the Pakistan government is saying they only lost 4 soldiers, but people are dying, and that tends to inflame people. Okay. Pakistan is now threatening India with nuclear war. Apparently, the Indian Army chief basically said that his military was ready to call Pakistan's nuclear bluff and carry out aggressive military operations across the border. Now, that is the danger. Both India and Pakistan do have rockets. They do have nuclear weapons. And like I was telling that caller earlier, they could fling off a few bombs and everybody else starts panicking and it could just go out of control. Meanwhile, India is going to buy $260 million worth of Israeli missiles and Russian bombs. So it is looking very serious. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. We already talked to Dustin in New Jersey, didn't we?
He got cut off.
He got cut off. Oh, that's right. All right, Dustin, we're back at you. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, Mike, actually, I wanted to talk about India and Pakistan. Remember when Bill Clinton was in and Musharraf was the president of Pakistan? It actually came so close, he actually rolled out the nuclear weapons and was authorized the military to use them. And I know Bill Clinton called him, or they had a meeting or something, and you know, he told him not to do it or something. But that was the second war, I think. I think I lost count after the 4th one. I mean, it's amazing. Like, the British split these 2 groups up. I mean, you wonder if it's like, I mean, they have a lot in common, and it's amazing how they just hate each other. You know, because they're told their whole lives to hate each other, like Russia or the United States back in the Cold War days. You know, now
it's religious.
Mostly the United States.
It's religious. Yeah. When at the time of Gandhi, the Hindus and Muslims were pretty much spread evenly throughout India, the way they're spreading Muslims and Christians evenly throughout Europe and the United States. And there was constant friction and constant fighting. So when the new nation was being formed, when Britain left it, they said, we're going to split it into 2 countries, one for the Hindus and one for the Muslims, and just let them go that way. And, of course, that meant that the vast majority of people had to make that trip into the other country. And they had to leave behind everything that they'd known. Yeah, that created a huge amount of animosity between India and Pakistan that has existed to this day. And of course, the other half of Pakistan eventually got its independence, and it's now Bangladesh.
And people don't realize that they have a full-scale nuclear war. Los Angeles will probably be uninhabitable, and all that radiation will flow down from where Pakistan and India is, following the wind patterns, and they'll probably spread across the United States, partially. You know, so I mean, yeah, they hate each other, and you know, like they're gonna do in these border, like look at Kashmir, you know, like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You know, it's like over a small piece of nothing, right?
Yep.
Nothing in what's in Kashmir, you know, nothing. You know, unless there's some strategic oil reserves or something there that nobody knows about. But Mike, your call is talking about Terminator 2. No, you got to watch The Day After, On the Beach, both versions. The newer one had to do with China, not the original one with the Russians on the beach. And also, ever heard of a movie called Threads? It was made in Britain. That scared me more than The Day After. It was an old movie from the 70s, I believe, called Threads.
Don't recall that one.
Yeah, it was the same, you know, surviving a nuclear war, and it's very gritty, like grittier than The Day After. You know, that movie should be shown every year in this country, just as a reminder of what these weapons can do. You know, and Mike, I want to switch topics. You mentioned how all these psychologists are coming out against Trump, like giving him like this physical from across the numerous states away. You know,
yes.
Remember Bill Frisk? Remember him, the Republican who, what was her name?
Vaguely.
Teresa Shrive? Yeah.
Yeah.
He said she wasn't a vegetable, remember? Like he saw it. She's not a vegetable, you know, the whole thing of him getting involved in somebody else's, some people's family and business. You know, that really made me mad I got mad at the Republican Party at that particular point of that guy. You know, that there's a religious part of the Republican Party, is that? You know,
well,
just to get, you know, I didn't understand why he got involved. You know?
Well, it was the idea, you know, right to life, pulling the plug is basically murder, and like the idea of just when a fetus becomes human, there really is no hard line, and everybody's got their own opinion. And I think that's why they've changed the name to persistent vegetative state, where there's going to be no coming back from that. All right, well, listen, we're at a commercial break now. I'm going to go check on Claire, and thank you for the phone call, Dustin. We'll be back with another caller after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just got a listener email. Apparently, that movie Threads, which came out in 1984, is available over on Vimeo. And so if you have a Vimeo account, you can log on in and search for Threads and look for it there. And according to this listener, the ending is just really frightening. Well, the idea of a nuclear Armageddon is a theme that's run through a lot of movies. The first version of The Time Machine, they updated the original story to have nuclear bombs going off. And that's because these weapons are scary. But I think up until last Friday, most of us' experience of a nuclear weapon is far off in history or through pictures. And those pictures really do not convey the scale of what these weapons can do. And again, Saturday, at least for those of us here in Hawaii, nuclear weapons stopped being an abstraction. And they became very concrete and very real. And obviously, we should all be very concerned that we have all of these criminals and money junkies and corrupted people who are on the verge of blowing up the world because they can't think of anything else to do to stay in power. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Steve in Salt Lake City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'd like to take my answer off the air. Can I change the subject off of the Pakistan-India deal? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Mike? My question is about the illegal immigration. Are the Democrats doing that to get more votes, or is it because the whole monetary system's a pyramid scheme and they need more and more people to support it?
Well, having more people to support the pyramid only works if you have jobs for them all, and we don't have enough jobs even for the legal American citizens. But there are two agendas that appear to be at work regarding the illegal immigrants and the refugees. The first one, of course, is the globalist agenda of trying to blur all of the nations and ethnic groups together so people have less of a sense of who they are and are easier to control. The Democrats are taking advantage of that agenda by going on down to the borders and saying, come on in, and by the way, you will thank us by voting Democratic.
Right. Wow. So we have a similar problem here, like India and Pakistan, the Muslim and the Hindu. We have the Democrat and the Republican. We're going to have a war here pretty soon, the way things are going.
Yeah, it could happen, but again, at the religious angle, we have all these Muslims that are being flooded in and distributed throughout Europe and here in the United States of America. And then you look at what happened when India was created, where it had to break into Pakistan, and all the fighting and friction that it took to separate those two populations out again. Somewhere down the road, unless this immigration open borders is stopped now, somewhere down the road, the same exact thing will happen here in the United States and in Europe.
Right. And that's almost like it's planned that way or something.
They don't care. They want their immediate objective, and what's going to happen 10, 20, 30 years down the road, not their problem to worry about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Michael, and I hope you and Claire are doing good, and I appreciate everything you guys do.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm pretty much over this. I'm still, a little congested, but I'm worried about Claire now. I got to take care of Claire. All right. Another phone call. Lenny in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I would like to speak about the planned impeachment of Trump, and you can see where the thread is going. Last night on the show, Madam Secretary, I just saw the promo. I didn't watch the show. It was after the football game went off last night, and they ran this promo in which the so-called president of the show loses his temper, and she looks at him and says, "Mr. President, you are not well."
Maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was thinking about that. There's no question right now that the political powers that be are trying to use film and TV to sell certain ideas and concepts as acceptable to the American people. In fact, I read this review of the latest Pitch Perfect movie, Pitch Perfect 3. Now, the first one's one of Claire's favorite films, being a choir director, all very pleasant, just a lot of music, a lot of fun, mostly the music. But apparently this last one is loaded with pro-Pentagon propaganda. Apparently they're on military bases, and it's out there, rah-rah, the troops and everything.
Correct. And so you can see where it's headed. That when you've got people who aren't even psychologists or psychiatrists saying that he's mentally unstable, they don't have a license, as you stated earlier, you can see that the push is on. This is going to be the reason they are going to impeach him. Okay, so my question is, where will the American people's mindset be at that point in time?
Well, it depends on how successful the propaganda is. If they can convince everybody that Trump is mentally unstable, they don't need to go through impeachment. They just invoke the 25th Amendment. And the 25th Amendment requires far fewer people to sign on to the deal. Basically, it's the cabinet, I think, and the vice president, and they can basically have President Trump sent off to the happy home. And he's basically stuck there until he convinces the cabinet and the vice president he is able to resume his duties, which would probably be never. So this push to declare him as being crazy and mentally unstable has nothing to do with impeachment. In fact, they haven't found anything for which he could be impeached, and that may be why they're pushing the mentally unstable issue, because impeachment requires the president to have committed a crime. High crimes and misdemeanors. We're not talking parking tickets here. And I think that was the reason for the big push over the Russia-Trump collusion. That was going to be the foundation of an impeachment complaint, but there's no proof for that. And so I think that's why they're going out the other side.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out there and to let people know that this is definitely, this is a thread that they're following, and you're correct in the sense that if they declare him mentally unstable, if you remember the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where Jack Nicholson tried to escape the system by pretending to be crazy. Remember now, if you commit a crime, when you do the time, you can get out, but in a mental institution, you can't get out until someone says you can get out, or declares you mentally competent to get out.
Yeah, and the problem with the whole mental health religion is it's all subjective. There is no machine that you can hook somebody up to where you'll get a needle that says psychotic, manic, depressive, normal. It just doesn't exist. It's always subjective. And in the interest of selling more psychiatric medications, the psychiatric industry defines pretty much all normal human behavior as some form of mental illness. The desire to eat healthy, organic food is now declared a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. So it's, it is a trap.
Go ahead, sorry. Yeah, exactly. And just let me say one more thing. I'm going as far as declaring the so-called psychiatry industry as the modern-day torturers of the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, because everything comes out of the Tavistock Institute. Even their standards are set by the Tavistock Institute in Sussex, England. Okay, and this has been the thing all along. If you can control the mind, you can control the person and the soul and the people. So I think only the strong will survive. Only the strong of mind and will and soul will survive this thing. But I thank you for your time.
All right, I thank you too, and we're going to switch over to Charlie in Los Angeles. Charlie, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Lost Charlie.
We lost Charlie?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then the phone lines are open. Getting on back to the news. Over in Palestine, there is a growing celebrity, and that is 16-year-old Ahed Tamimi. And she's being referred to as the Palestinians' Nelson Mandela. And basically, she's been arrested by the IDF for slapping a couple of soldiers who had just shot her brother with a rubber-coated bullet, causing him injury. And she's become a bit of a viral celebrity around the world. She's attracting a lot of attention to what is going on in Palestine. And basically, the media is able to get to the family, and the interviews are going on out. So this is a very, very good thing. She's a very brave woman. There's no question about that. All right, we're going to take a phone call. George in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, aloha, Michael. First off, I wanted to share with you something that my chiropractor taught me years ago about how to do an instant chiropractic adjustment that if it works for Claire, she's well enough to do it now, great. If not, she can do it in the future, and our audience members can do this as well to help them when they're feeling back pain. Yes. Is she able to lie flat on her back okay?
Yes.
Okay. What you do is she bends her knees, bringing them up in the air so her feet are moving towards her butt, so her legs are, her knees are straight up in the air.
I got you.
And she's, okay. Then she takes her hands, if she can, and grabs the lower part of her legs on both sides, left and right, and then just bring them up into fetal position very slowly. So that her legs are now, the top of her knees are practically at her chest as much as they can be. And you just hold that fetal position for several minutes. And in not all cases, but in many cases, vertebrae will go back into position. She should do this very slowly, and if there's any pain, just back out of it.
All right, well, I'll ask the chiropractor about it on Wednesday because he's got the x-rays, and he can see what's actually going on in there. I think the precautionary principle applies in this case. We're okay with using the TENS units and what we know has already been helping, but I don't want to do anything in terms of manipulating her spine or her back until the chiropractor says this is a good thing to do. But I do appreciate that.
Well, of course, and maybe you can do it later. Now, moving on to what happened, as we both know, and most of your audience know, it's not always a good idea to take whatever the government tells you at face value. I'm having a hard time believing that when this operator made the mistake of triggering the EAS alert that there was no "Are you sure?" button. I have an easier time believing that, well, maybe, yeah, there's a shift change and somebody had the wrong item up and the guy thought he was pressing "Are you sure?" for a test and it was an actual, missile alert. That's more believable to me. But having said that, I would much rather see a screenshot of that actual software to see what it was before I take what the government says about this, at face value. Having said that, there have been so many strange things that have been occurring lately, like the Atlanta airport shutdown for over 12 hours with no power when there's redundant systems.
Yes.
There's reports on the internet about an Israeli security firm being able to work autonomously at that airport, independent of TSA, so that with no power, radiation detectors are down. Nuclear materials could have been smuggled in and out through that firm, and nobody would be the wiser. So, there is the possibility that what happened, and I want to say this clearly, I think it's only a slight possibility. It's more likely this is not, but we need to think about these things and investigate them just to be sure, because God knows our mainstream press aren't going to do it. That maybe what happened in Hawaii was a diversion, so that everybody is running for cover while something else is going on. And the other possibility, which is even more sinister, is I'm going to go along with what this other person you were referring to said in a different way, that maybe there was a false flag that didn't happen, but instead of being a missile incoming, it was a bomb that was already there. And so while everybody's scrambling, the bomb doesn't go, they send out the alert, but the bomb doesn't go off. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
In other words, remember what happened on 9/11? There was a BBC reporter. The word got out that got to him that World Trade Center Building 7 had collapsed when it hadn't collapsed yet, and that announcer was announcing this before the thing actually happened.
Yeah, it was actually a young lady. Let me tell you why I don't agree with that interpretation of what happened on Saturday. If somebody had wanted to do a false flag and put out this alert, a missile is on its way, it wouldn't have just been on the cell phones and TV. The siren system would have gone off immediately, and there would have been reports on the news channels, on the TV and on the radio. Yes, this is real. Head for the shelters. The fact that the sirens didn't sound immediately and there was nothing on the local news and TV channels is why I first thought it was a hack or somebody's idea of a joke. And it wasn't until the sirens around Pearl Harbor went off that Claire and I thought this might actually be real, and the local TV news just isn't up to speed yet. But in the end, it turned out to be a hoax, and that's why I think it really was, in fact, an accident for this one system.
It probably was, but I'm still, not convinced that there was not an "Are you sure?" button, and the guy, he's probably terribly embarrassed he hit it. That, to me, seems to be the most likely scenario.
I think it's a classic case of government contractor sloppy software development. Apparently, this is a new system. They've just started putting it in, and they didn't quite have the bugs out of it. But in terms of a user interface, definitely before any alert really goes out, there should be a second "Are you really sure?" button. And that would prevent this sort of thing from going on. In the end, it was the end of the shift. The guy wanted to get home. He pulled the menu. He hit the button. Said, the people coming on in will deal with the aftermath.
Well, thanks, Mike.
All right,
hope Claire gets better soon.
I certainly hope so, too. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are now open. and we're coming up here on the top of the hour here. Apparently, over in Israel, Communications Minister Ayub Kara came on out and dubbed the African migrants a sanitary nuisance. And on top of that, he's calling for the death sentence for fake news. Israel is launching a deportation plan for all those Ethiopian Jews to be sent back home. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the telephones. Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, good day, Michael, and happy holiday.
Happy holiday.
Michael, what's on my mind is what's going on. Yes, thank you. What's going on is on my mind is I'm listening to the news here in South Florida, and all I hear is Trump, asshole, the asshole. Now, they don't know if it's an a hole or the house. It's either a house or it's a hole. I don't know. I don't get it. When it was this Dickie Durbin, this schmuck who worries more about Israel, and this Schumer who worries actually more about Israel and the wall around Israel than they worry about our own country. That just goes to show you, Michael, the power of these people. They're 2%, and yet they're very powerful. But, Mike, one thing they're not talking about too much about this immigration problem is I'm hearing about all these people coming down with these super bugs, these flus. I mean, these people are getting deadly sick here in Florida. They were talking about it in the Herald. These people are getting sick with all kinds of flus in California, all over the United States. These are strains now. They don't know if they can handle it. It's like the Spanish flu in 1918 or something.
Well, it's not to that level yet, but it's definitely climbing rapidly, and the hospitals are strained to the point where you have to wonder if there was a major pandemic flu like happened in 1918. It's clear our medical infrastructure is not up to dealing with it. But again, there are 3 strains of flu floating around. There's the Aussie flu, which is what I think Claire and I had, the H3N2, I think. Then there's the Japanese flu, and then there's the French flu. Britain has been hit hard. I imagine that this is probably all over, not just the United States. It's got to be up in Canada, and it is a serious, serious problem.
Well, Michael, I believe this has to do with immigration because listen, Michael, in the Sun Sentinel, I remember like 4 months ago I was reading a Sun Sentinel paper, and they were talking about the AIDS epidemic that Haiti. AIDS was running rampant back in the early '90s.
Yes.
Around the night, and a lot of these people were coming from those countries. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Trump is just telling the truth, and these media schwines, they don't want to. They control the media. So you maybe have a couple of news net, Fox and OAN talking a little bit on Trump's behalf. All these, if the media spent as much time as they did on Trump's S word as they would about the illegal invasion of our country since 1965, this country would be straightened out, Michael. We wouldn't be having all this infighting and this hatred and all that. Because, and another thing, I see all these black leaders on MLK Day, but I don't see none of them standing up for Trump. Very few of them saying, "Hey, listen, these illegals ain't helping us. They're pushing us even further back in the bus, Michael." What are the illegals doing for the black community in this country? You're not doing them no favors, I can tell you that.
Yeah, because, I mean, these immigrants and refugees represent competition for jobs even in the black communities. And that's never worked out very well. I remember the South Central riots that were sparked because these immigrants had come into the black neighborhoods and started setting up businesses, and the blacks were feeling economically exploited. But getting on back to the issue of the corporate media is still pushing the Democratic liberal agenda, which includes globalism and open borders. And the reason they make a big deal over the specific language Trump supposedly used in this meeting is they want to make that the news story that Americans pay attention to, instead of, did Trump have a really good point that we ought to be selective in immigration? The corporate media's job is to not let Americans think about those questions, to keep them dazzled with dirty words and sexy stories, and that's basically what they're supposed to do. Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take a station identification.
I want to hang on if I can.
All right, stay on the line. We'll come right back to you after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And Tom, in Florida, you had something more you wanted to add.
Yeah, Michael, what I want to add is OAN News was talking today how much it's going to cost for 9 years for these illegal the DACA kids alone. It's $36 billion. That does not count the money that these people are sending back to Mexico that never comes back to the United States. Is over $19 billion a year that they're sending back to Mexico and Latin America that never comes back to this country. Where does that money go? And that money never comes back to the economy of the United States. I don't know how that actually works. Maybe you do.
Well, ultimately, yes, it does come back. It's used to buy products. And so they're not sending money. They're sending food, appliances, products back down there. But you're right. It's sucking the real wealth of this nation out and bleeding it out to these other countries.
Yes. And that's shameful. And Donald Trump should be talking about that every day in the media, OANN and Fox, and people. The mainstream media don't want to talk the truth. They just want to talk about racial. It's always about race with these demorests. 1965 with Kennedy, like I told you, Teddy Kennedy, what he did with in his lies about they will never flood the country to all these people, which would turn out to be a big freaking lie, a hypocritical lie on Kennedy's part. He was nothing but a liar, and I don't want to go there. But Michael, and another thing is with the hospitals, that they never talk about how these hospitals in California were closing down. I don't know if you remember back in the mid 2000s, like 2010, they were talking about all these hospitals are closing down. They never hear a story too much about that anymore. What happened to all these hospitals that are supposedly going bankrupt, bellying up under Obama? What happened with all that?
Well, it was all tangled up in that Obamacare stuff. I want to step on back here, though, to this immigration issue. Just because a president is personally racist doesn't mean they're not going to do the right thing. And this being Martin Luther King Day, it seems worthwhile to remind everybody that Lyndon Johnson personally was a very racist man. And yet, he basically signed the Civil Rights Act. And there was a report that Martin Luther King basically was in the Oval Office and said, I know your real feelings about black people, and I know the real feelings of your supporters about black people. And Lyndon Johnson said, yeah, but I'm the president, and now I can do what needs to be done. So simply screaming that Trump is a racist doesn't invalidate his arguments. And again, illegal is not a race, and that is the issue. These people are committing to...
Yes, on that subject you're talking about, the blacks. What is the most powerful black country, in your opinion, in the world? And if they're in a majority, you think the whites are going to have a chance where they're in a majority? Blacks?
Well, we've seen some examples.
What is the richest black country?
We've seen some examples down in Africa that when the balance shifts from white control to black control, the new incoming government, rather than achieving parity and balance, goes on a revenge spree. And we saw that in Zimbabwe, and we're already hearing language like that right here in the United States of America, that whiteness must be made to go away, that all the wealth should be taken away from the white people and just given to all these other races here. But Zimbabwe faced a major disaster because they were out there confiscating farms and factories from their white owners who knew how to make it all work, and they were giving them to blacks to say, here, you're now empowered, and they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to run the factories. They weren't trained as farmers, because there's a lot more to farming than most people think unless you've grown up on a farm. And Zimbabwe just had a major economic hit because of that. These dramatic changes can be very, very dangerous to a nation.
Well, Michael, there you go. And Donald Trump is the majority. We are the majority. And you know what? As long as we are the majority in the United States, we need to tell them, hey, listen, you are the minority. And you know what? We're not going to let you push us around. We're not South Africa. We're not Zimbabwe. We're going to stay in the majority. Like Donald made a point. Listen, let's start bringing some people here from Norway, some Sweden. All those people want to get out of there because they're flooded with Muslims. Let's bring them here. Let's bring all the white South Africans to the United States. Because, listen, once they get to the majority, Michael, they're brutal. They get brutal. They get become brutalized. They'll brutalize you. So you know what? And by the way, they never want to talk in the history books about the two biggest slave owners in 1865 were black men.
Yes.
And the ones that brought all the blacks over to the United States were not white men. They were black chieftains. And Africa say, hey, give me some rum, give me some beads, and here, take how many as you want. Because if not, we're going to take care of ourselves. And that was exactly, they never want to talk about the truth history. They call each other brother, but and if you go back in 1860 or in 1850, they were selling them for beads. They were selling there for beads. If not, they would get rid of them. And let's tell the truth. It was about rum, it was about beads, and it was about the white man to say, hey, get on this boat, we're going to take you back to pick cotton. It didn't work like that. That was all big lie that the history books about. These people running these curriculum in these schools are disgraceful in these universities. They need to start telling the truth. The biggest slave owners in 1865 when Lincoln was still alive were black men.
Yes.
Michael?
Well, and the other message that needs to get Tom, the other message that needs to get on out there is how few people were actually slave owners in the antebellum South. It was only 1.5% of the people.
Right.
And you need to remember there were a lot of people who were not slave owners. The vast majority were not slave owners. Again, I get very upset when somebody writes me and says, well, you may have never owned slaves, but you're descended from slave owners. And no, I am not. I'm very big into genealogy. I've been through the family tree. I have nobody in my ancestry who's owned a slave. I do have people in my ancestry who ran a station on the Underground Railroad. And but again, to the liberal agenda, just come up with a concept, declare everybody guilty, apply that wide brush that I'm so opposed to, and just trying to get money and political power for it.
Well, Michael, in Haiti, there hasn't been a slave owner since 1804. What does that tell you? Since 1804, there was not one white male on that country of Haiti, which was called Santa Dominica. Or Santo Domingo or Santo Dominica, I can't remember. And if you split Haiti up from Santo Domingo, you see a difference of the two countries. You know, I don't know if you know the history of Haiti, but you can look it up, and they still practice voodoo over there like mad.
Yes.
And they have it here in South Florida. It's unbelievable. And it's the same what you would see around here if you came and saw it with your own eyes. But, you know, they don't ever want to talk the truth. But there hasn't been no French white man running Haiti since 1804.
Yep.
You understand, Michael?
So much for white power. Well, the Clintons are pretty much calling the shots down there now, or at least they were for a long while.
There you go. Chelsea got her wedding. Chelsea got a wedding from it. Got a big wedding.
All right. Well, listen, Tom,
Foundation.
Thanks an awful lot. I'm going to let you go. We got another caller waiting. But before I do that, I'm going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to take a phone call from Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Nui nui.
Nui nui. Night far and all. Hello and aloha to you both.
Thank you.
Two quick thoughts for you. One, on the pleasant note, so to speak, I can empathize about the thing about and wish a speedy recovery to Claire because, quite frankly, when it comes to chiropractic actions, no two spines are alike.
Yes.
Even in the most subtlest of ways, they can be very different. What one does with one spine, you cannot do with the other, with the next one.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, Claire's got some other issues there, which is why the gentleman who was giving me the pull the knee up thing, no, I'm not doing anything to Claire's back unless the chiropractor says this is what you do. Claire had another chiropractor before who turned out to be unavailable when this incident happened. But I got to tell you, I like the new guy. I get a really good feeling from him. But he's got the x-rays, and he's going to tell us what we need to do. And I do know it takes a long time. I just got an email from somebody saying they did exactly the same thing, threw out their back for coughing, and it took them weeks to get back to normal.
Ew. Well, the thing with rolling your spine or whatever while you're on your back, for some people that can help. For other people, it may not be applicable for that matter. So it just depends on the individual. The thing is that as long as Claire is content with what the chiropractor does and says and advises, that's the main thing. As long as she is not in pain from the session, that's the main thing.
Well, that didn't work out that way. First of all, Claire is very impressed with the guy. She thinks he's very knowledgeable. And I've been to chiropractors before myself, so I'm looking at this guy and I get a good feeling. But this chiropractor said to correct this problem, it was going to hurt worse after the adjustment than before. And I've been through that as well because when I was dealing with my back injury, my chiropractor said the same thing. I'm going to do this, but it's really going to hurt, and it's going to hurt for a while. I think the next thing we need to do is get Claire back to the regular doctor. She's going to need some more pain medication. I don't want her to be caught without it.
Well, there's that too. However, do you have an idea of why it may be hurting after the treatment?
Well, that's just what the chiropractor said, and again, that was my experience when I had my back injury.
Okay. Well, just to share a little tidbit with you, probably the reason why it may be sore or painful afterwards is because, one, your muscle tissue in those general areas are so used to compensating that once the adjustment's done, it's a matter of getting those muscle tissues to calm down and relax so
That's
they actually
exactly
go back
right.
into place.
That is exactly right. The primary pain is not in the spine itself, but to either side, and it's just in
now,
a very, very tight.
Goes,
yeah.
As far as the pain medication goes, I hope you don't have to resort to that. But if I could share another tidbit with you.
One more.
Now, this is something that I've used. I tend to refer to it. I don't tend to recommend it, and especially if someone has an issue with it. There is actually an herbal spray that's called Arnica Active. It actually has two other herbal components
I've heard of that.
You actually...
I've heard of that. In fact, we might actually have some here.
It's actually a spray. You spray it on the outside of the skin, and it permeates where the body allows it to permeate. And you do not ingest it.
Yes.
And I've come to find out that stuff does wonders. At least for me it has. It may be helpful. Now, on to the less pleasant things. As far as Chelsea Manning going to D.C. and all that kind of good stuff in the District of Criminals, she'll fit right in. Because regardless of what sex you are, physically, psychologically, or whatever have you, with the District of Criminals, no problem. She'll probably roll with the best of them. So, people have a canary about her going and getting into the Senate. Yeah. So, what other politician in D.C. isn't a criminal already? So,
actually,
anyway,
as I understand it, most of the members of Congress do have criminal records.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
So the whole, and on top of that, the whole aspect of whether or not Trump has been deemed as being psychologically unstable and all that. Well, if I recall correctly, Ronald Reagan had an issue with Alzheimer's or whatever the case was, and yet he served his term in office, if I recall.
Well, that's
but
because
I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, they hushed it up. They were still trying to sell the idea of perfect presidents to the American people. Even after Richard Nixon, everybody got real touchy. But yes, Reagan was suffering from Alzheimer's through most of his second term, and George H.W. Bush was actually calling the shots.
Yep, there you go. Well, y'all have a great one, and much hugs and speedy healing to both.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go.
Easy.
All right. Now, last week, there was a story we reported where supposedly the Wall Street Journal had claimed that Donald Trump said he has a good relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And I commented last Friday at the time, this seems so completely out of touch with Trump's earlier rhetoric. Well, Trump is now saying that the Wall Street Journal misquoted him, and they're basically saying this is false news. It's fake news. The newspaper wanted a big story and apparently came up with this, and Trump is now saying it's fake news. Apparently, Trump is going to be handing out his fake news awards this Wednesday. It was supposed to happen today, but he decided to hold off 2 more days until everybody's kind of back from the holiday and paying attention. Little bit of good news, and another reason to have known that the missile alert on Saturday was false. The 2 Koreas have decided to unify their Olympic teams. The South Korean athletes and the North Korean athletes are going to be joining together, and they're going to represent Korea. A tremendously symbolic gesture when you consider the Sunshine Policy. Moon Jae-in may actually be able to pull this off. He's making all the right moves to say it's time to reunify our Koreas. The war is over. Doesn't even matter who won or lost. We'll call it a draw. They'll take out that DMZ, take out all those landmines. North Korea has raw materials. South Korea has industry. Everybody's going to do fine. Okay, let's take another phone call. Loomer in South Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Loomer, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello?
I have to be somewhere.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So, I have arthritis. You know, it's rheumatoid arthritis, and I think I got it from hepatitis B shot. But I had back pains too, and so what I started doing was supplementing with a particular company's line of supplements, and it puffed up the cartilages within the back there and spread them out again, and my back pain's almost completely healed now. And so, if you would like, I can give you the name of the stuff.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. It's Youngevity.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. I thought you were going to say something like glucosamine chondroitin.
Yeah. No, use a glucogel and Beyond Osteo FX, and that would along with maybe Beyond Tangy Tangerine to go on top of it. You can get the healthy bone pack, and that would after 90 days or so, I wouldn't say stop going and seeing the chiropractor, but use this as an adjunct to it, and then pretty soon you won't need the chiropractor anymore.
Loomer, you're starting to sound like a commercial, so thank you for the phone call, and we're going to let you go here. Alrighty, I appreciate everybody calling in with the various advice, and we have a lot of the natural supplements. We have a TENS unit, we have the gels, we have cannabis oil, and we're using those that we feel it is safe to use. But again, we're not going to be a Christian Scientist with appendicitis. We have a chiropractor, and hopefully going to be able to figure out what's going on and get Claire back on the path to being well. And we both understand, sadly, it's going to take a while. All right, let's turn to the economic news here. Apparently, in a revived version of the oil and gas war, the United States is arm-twisting Europe to stop buying Russian gas and buy liquefied natural gas from the United States of America. The only problem is the American LNG is much more expensive. And basically, in a world of free markets, there should be competition, and Europe should be able to buy their gas anywhere they want for the lowest price. But while Washington is big on free trade across the Pacific and the Atlantic, they don't believe in it when it comes to Russia. And so basically they're doing whatever they can to hamper the implementation of the Russian Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project, and they're doing it by trying to cut into Russia's gas revenues. Now, nearly 40% of student loan borrowers are expected to default by the year 2023. That is a huge default. But then again, the college student loans was a scam. They took higher education and they turned it into indoctrination along with being a debt machine. Get these kids, plunge them on that debt hook as early and as hard as you can, and they are going to be your slaves for most of the rest of their life. That's what this was all about. And as I said earlier in the show, scholarships for these refugees and no money for indigenous Americans, just debt. Hardly fair at all. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about the student loans, which are probably never going to be repaid because the high-paying jobs these kids were lured into college with simply do not exist. Most of them have been offshored to other countries. The few that remain, many are being filled by these H-1B visas. It does seem like the American people, the ordinary American people, are at the very bottom of the government's list of priority. Now, since everybody's attention is on Hawaii because of what happened last Saturday, looking at Hawaii's economy, we're not doing well. Our agriculture has basically gone away for the most part. The fields turned over for condo development. There's still pineapples. The Dole Pineapple Company is still here. Sugar production is pretty much gone. We actually have to import sugar now. And according to the latest results, 48% of Hawaii households can't afford the basics. And it's very, very stressful, obviously. Hawaii is also the most expensive state to have an electric car in. This was a story that came out in Hawaii Free Press, and it talks about a study that compared the operating costs of traditional gasoline-powered cars to electric cars in various states. And in many states, there is a tremendous economic advantage to having an electric car, much lower cost of operation. Unfortunately, in those states, the states are now adding taxes specifically on electric cars to make up the shortfall in tax revenues. But here in Hawaii, because of the high cost of our electricity, it actually doesn't really pencil out all that much, which is sad because I was seriously thinking about trying to find an electric car in the near future. Speaking of cars, and Claire and I are looking, the most reliable cars in the U.S., the 15 cars Americans keep the longest before trading them in on a new one. And this is an article that came out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Here is the list. Number 1, the Toyota Highlander. Number 2, the Toyota Sienna. Number 3, the Toyota Tundra. Number 4, the Toyota Prius. Number 5, the Toyota RAV4. Number 6, the Honda Odyssey. Number 7, Toyota Sequoia. Number 8, Toyota Tacoma. Number 9, the Honda CR-V. Number 10, the Toyota Avalon. Number 11, the Acura MDX. Number 12, the Toyota Camry. Number 13, the Subaru Forester. Number 14, the Nissan Frontier. And finally, at 15, the Volkswagen Golf. So if you're looking to buy a newer car, you might focus on that. I didn't realize Toyota had that kind of a reputation for durability. I thought that was always going to be Subaru's claim to fame, but they only made one entry on this list, and Honda got a few mentions, and I've always had very good luck with Hondas. We've had 2 Hondas that went from brand new to literally falling apart, but it took a long time to do it. Our current Honda is 18 years old, and you know, I love it. I absolutely do love it, but it is time for us to seriously start thinking about getting something a little bit newer that we can rely on, especially the next time we get a warning that there is a ballistic missile inbound. Now, Bill and Melinda Gates are out there showing their charity and looking outward. They're going to pay off Nigeria's $76 million debt to Japan. Well, Bill, I think the money would be better spent paying off the student loan debt of American college students, many of whom are your customers over there at Microsoft. And I know you don't work there anymore, but that's where you got all this money in the first place, from computer users and students. Shouldn't you be giving back to them? Or did you get one of those letters from a Nigerian prince saying, if you will help me move $76 million out? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Over in El Cajon, California, 9 people are facing misdemeanor charges for giving food to the homeless. And apparently the reason the city passed this ordinance isn't part of a plan to just get rid of the homeless, but concern that the citizens contract hepatitis A, because apparently contact with the homeless is now deemed to be a serious health hazard. Boy, it just gets worse and worse out there in California. Meanwhile, illegals are fleeing to Canada, and basically they're being told, once again, they'll be allowed in, they'll be allowed to become citizens, there'll be all kinds of free stuff. But Ahmed Hussein, Canada's immigration minister, said illegals shouldn't waltz into Canada and expect to get cradle-to-the-grave freebies, and in point of fact, they can still be deported back to their point of origin if they steal across America's northern border. Good for Canada on that one. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Pardon me. And apparently, James O'Keefe, I don't know why I keep renaming him, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas is going to be on Hannity tonight talking about the latest round of videos coming on out where they have gotten these people who are working at Twitter to come out and openly admit the harvesting of your data and the selling it to marketing managers, and basically that there is really no privacy inside Twitter, that the people who work for Twitter can look into the DMs. They're hiring staff to basically keep an eye out, and they're trying to kick people out of Twitter who are engaging in some very dangerous or offensive behavior. But at the same time, they're also imposing censorship targeting on conservatives. So it's a two-edged sword. If your kids are on Twitter, obviously you want people who post naked pictures of their private parts to be booted off Twitter, but at the same time we should have the First Amendment. So that should be an interesting show on Hannity. Now, even though Merkel seems to have pulled together the beginnings of a coalition government, it's not looking very good for Merkel herself. It's looking more and more like there are enough people within Merkel's own party who might vote against her that she could still wind up losing her job. Germany's Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel is still out there pushing the idea that the European Union will eventually completely control the continent. Today, Poland, tomorrow, the world. Why do we have to keep going through this over and over and over again? Story coming out of naturalnews.com. Parents of school-age children in Wisconsin are very upset and angry over the latest curriculum to enter their schools. And apparently 8th graders in West Bend, a northwest suburb of Milwaukee, are being taught they're bad people if their skin color is white, or if their families have two parents of the opposite sex who are still married. I don't know where they get that last one. But I mean, this is the propaganda. You are automatically inferior if your skin is white. It's racist. They're screaming about Donald Trump's language in his meeting. This is racist. And you don't cure racism by being racist in reverse. You end racism the way Martin Luther King did. You judge by the content of their character. They're teaching this in the public schools, that if you are born with a white skin, you are bad. We're hearing this all over the place. Oh, white people they're inferior. It's just blind luck they wound up with all the technology and the wealth and the world's great buildings. Now, over in New Mexico, this is a little ugly. Over in New Mexico, Governor Susana Martinez is proposing a bill that would shield police officers, basically give police officers legal immunity from killing or using excessive force against suspects. The only time this law would not apply would be police officers who do not obey their orders of their superiors or who break from their training. But this is real police state stuff. The police are out there killing more people than the terrorists did. They're stealing more wealth from the American people through the civil forfeiture laws than all of the robbers and muggers and bank robbers combined. And the governor of New Mexico wants to give them legal protection. Yeah, we're sorry the officer shot your kid, but hey, what are you going to do? Getting on back to that serious flu that the caller was talking about, it really is out there. Apparently, this is over in Great Britain. As you know, they've got a huge problem in the hospitals. They have put off all non-emergency medical treatments until at least next month, and the hospitals are completely filled up. And apparently now they're so desperate, they're asking medical students to volunteer to help out with certain things like drawing bloods, which medical students aren't supposed to do, but they're going to bend the rules and say, yeah, it's an emergency, we need these people in here. Story out of statnews.com. The severe flu season is stretching hospitals very thin, and that's a bad omen. And they're talking about hospitals are full from Rhode Island to San Diego. Apparently, one hospital had to erect a tent outside of the emergency room to manage the influx of people with flu symptoms. Wait times are getting longer. And a lot of people are starting to say this could be like the 1918 misnamed Spanish flu. If it turns out to be that way, it's obvious the medical industrial complex is ill prepared to handle it. They'll just say, you know, get a shot, have Tamiflu, it'll all work out. No, it won't. Stuff doesn't work. We have a very good friend who has a family member who just went into the hospital with the flu. And I say hospital very loosely because apparently they were out of beds and they had to set up a cot in the hallway for this person. They just put him on one of these, what they wheel the bodies around on. And that's his hospital bed. Now, we all know that the Clive and Bundy case came out with a more or less happy ending, although obviously the Bundys are dealing with the financial harm of what they've gone through. Over at The Hill, they have an article saying that the federal government's misconduct in the Clive and Bundy case actually goes all the way back to Ruby Ridge. And if you look at it, it was pretty much the same. There was a guy the government just flat out wanted to get. And The Hill is asking, is our government actually issuing licenses to kill to these FBI snipers? And when you look back at what happened at Ruby Ridge and the subsequent cover-up, yeah, and for that matter, Waco. Look at what happened at Waco. And I notice they're coming out with yet another movie about Waco to sell the official story that David Koresh was crazy and they all deserve to die. I will not waste my money on a ticket on that one. But yeah, every once in a while we see the real face of the United States government, and it is brutal. Now, there's some new developments over at Mandalay Bay, and I know I said I was going to put it on down, but unfortunately there is some stuff coming out that will make you scratch your head. Apparently, investigative reporter Jake Morphonos stayed at the Mandalay Bay, and while he was there, he was walking around, he met hotel security and the maintenance staff, and he talked to most of these people, and they said they don't know who Jesus Campos is. Now, this was the supposed security guard that was shot by Stephen Paddock on the 32nd floor. And all these security people and employees at the Mandalay Bay don't know who Stephen Shook is, who's the purported building engineer saved by Campos. So there's a certain lack of provenance there. Now, there may have been a significant amount of employee turnover since the shooting. That is to be expected to an extent. Apparently, Stephen Paddock's girlfriend told investigators her fingerprints would probably be on the ammo, and they were, but she may not have been present at the time of the shooting. But what's interesting is a story that has come on out from the Gateway Pundit. And it basically says federal documents reveal or confirm Stephen Paddock had likely accomplices and 7 different cell phones. Remember when they first described the interior of the room and they said there were multiple cell phone chargers, and then the next day they said, no, there was only one cell phone charger. Apparently he had 7 different cell phones, and apparently there's now been a link between an anonymous email account that Stephen Paddock was trading email with and one of the cell phones. So there is something going on in there. More lies, fraud, and deception here. Now, this one's a doozy. This one is a doozy. Catholics are asking President Trump to probe the issue of whether there was a Soros, Obama, Clinton conspiracy to force Pope Benedict out of the Vatican and replace him with a radical, clearly more liberal Pope Francis. The question is being asked, was America's spy network and diplomatic machinery used to bring a regime change in the Roman Catholic Church? Now, we know that Pope Benny the Rat had a dark background in his past, so it's quite possible there was information they could blackmail him with, possibly prosecute him with. And they simply said, you say you're tired, you step down, Pope Francis comes on in, and everything is much better. Getting into the world of computers, this thing with Intel's chips, we're going to be dealing with the circumstances of this for years. Apparently, Intel AMT security locks are bypassed on corporate laptops. This is new research on Intel's active management technology, and apparently it can be exploited to bypass login prompts on notebook computers. Insecure defaults in Intel AMT allow an intruder to completely bypass user and BIOS passwords and TPM and BitLocker pins to break into almost any corporate laptop in 30 seconds or less. This is from security firm F-Secure. The issue does require physical access to the targeted computer, and apparently is something new, unrelated to the recent Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities. Potentially affects millions of laptops around the world. Stop working to make them faster and more clever and just work to make them safe and secure. Of course, what needs to happen is some of these cyber criminals need to be caught and made a bloody example of. Here's another article. This is from alternet.org. Apparently, corporate hackers are stealing online identities and using them to post fake comments to push for the repeal of consumer laws. And supposedly, hundreds of thousands of comments, supposedly made by Americans, came in over the electronic transom to at least 5 different federal agencies, calling for an end to Obama-era consumer protections and other regulations that impede corporate profits. A series of investigative reports by the Wall Street Journal found that the people whose identity had been used did not send the comments. So it's grassroots lobbying. They're faking the comments. They're stealing. That may be the reason for all these massive break-ins to all these databases. So they've got the credentials where they can fake somebody's identity and say, hey, I'm Mr. Joe Blow over here, and I absolutely think that we should not hold corporations liable for damages caused by their products. Okay, getting on back over to Google, another condemnation, this one from the Federalist. Google's new so-called fact checker is clearly partisan garbage, and it's definitely enforcing an ideological and political bias. So everybody's posting stuff to Google. Anybody reading Google, they're only getting one side of the debate, the liberal side. The conservative side is being erased. That's why people are going over to these new startup social media platforms, which apparently still respect freedom of speech. Now, Mike Adams has come on out saying it's time to demand that the First Amendment expand to the online world, and this vindictive censorship must be stopped. Now, there's no reason why the First Amendment shouldn't apply to the Internet. The First Amendment was created at a time when speech and printed newspapers were the only means of communication. But as new forms of communication came online, the telegraph, the telephone, radio, and television, the First Amendment was presumed to apply to them as well. There is no legitimate legal reason why the First Amendment doesn't apply to the online world. And these social media corporations know it. Twitter knows that if they just start banning people's posts, they could get in legal trouble. That's why they engage in the process of shadow banning. and that is when you post on your Twitter account, you'll see your posts. But anybody else on another account looking at your feed won't see them. That way you don't find out you're being blocked. Because Twitter knows what they're doing is wrong and it is unconstitutional. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Charlie in Los Angeles. Aloha, Charlie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, that missile attack.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're just trying to see if their propaganda works. You know, and it works pretty well according to the way everybody was freaked out. And, you know, there's another thing is that you guys out in Hawaii and Alaska, you aren't participating in the war on terror like we are on the mainland here. We're fighting a good fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and you guys are out there, you know, in the nice warm breeze. You're just too happy out there, and they don't like happiness. So they needed to freak you out a little bit. Most definitely think they were just testing the propaganda.
Well, again,
why would this guy
the argument against that is that only one of the various systems had the message. And as I explained earlier in the show, the reason I didn't initially go for that message was because this brand new nuclear attack warning siren wasn't sounding at the same time. And that prompted me to check the local TV and radio news, which had absolutely nothing. And so at that point, I thought somebody had hacked into the system to play a trick. As it turns out, it was human error by one of the staffers. They were in the middle of a drill, it was a shift change, and things got out of control. Had it been a deliberate plan for a false flag attack or to test the propaganda, it would have been coordinated. In addition to what we got on the smartphones and the TV, the sirens would have gone off. There would have been stories about this on the TV and radio as well. So this was just a simple goof. Occam's razor applies here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Michael, I was just going to give my condolences for this horrible thing that I thought you had gone through, but it looks like you kept your cool head, and I'm surprised. I would have been completely freaked out.
Well, we were for a few minutes. We were for a few minutes because about 10 minutes after the alert, the sirens around Pearl Harbor did go off. And so for about 5 minutes there, Claire and I really were convinced it was the real deal.
Yeah, well, I'm really sorry about that. I mean, I'm very mad on behalf of everybody in Hawaii. Like, I'm very upset about this. This is like such an abuse of humanity. Like people putting their children down storm drains.
Yeah, that was out there. But where are you going to go? We don't have fallout shelters. Mateus, stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. Okay, so we're talking with Mateus in Canada, and you wanted to add something else.
Yeah, so I'm really upset on behalf of everybody that this happened. I see this as like an act of terrorism, not a textbook definition of them, but a lot of qualities of terrorizing the population. It's a total abuse of humanity. People at the best misusing their toys, at the worst intentionally misusing them, abusing them. And this is like somebody saying, okay, you're about to die. You'll never see your loved ones again. This is the end of the world for you. People are putting their children in storm drains, people driving 100 miles down the street, crying, screaming in the street, like in a movie, like a doomsday movie. It's like this a complete outrage. And the only thing that good, and I want to say I'm sorry that you had to go through that. Okay, you kept your stuff together better than most people, but a lot of people like really had a hard time with us.
Yeah, they did.
And I just want to say that the only good thing that could come out of this is that this could be like a wake-up call and maybe help inspire a bit of resistance against this rush to World War III. And hopefully this will backfire and have a consequence of putting some, speed up the political resistance to this direction that this is all going.
Well, I said that at the very top of the show. The two good things that are coming out of what happened on Saturday is that those Hawaiians who were laughing at the preppers, they're not laughing anymore, and they're realizing that, yes, this is a real possibility. They should be having some kind of preparations. Not that there are many places to go. We don't have the wonderful network of bomb shelters that like you would have in Moscow. We live on lava. It's very difficult to tunnel into. But for the shelter in place, water, food, storable food, all of that stuff, and now the Hawaiians are taking that seriously. The second thing is, yes, this scare, at least for us here on Hawaii, and hopefully for some of the people on the mainland, it took nuclear weapons and nuclear war from this abstract concept and turned it into something very real and very present. We thought that for those few minutes, Claire and I thought it was really going to happen. And we can't go back from that. We can't go back to a mindset where nuclear war is something that's far off and far away and off in history. And I suspect that will be changing our thinking about the subject.
Yeah, so I guess it's a mixed bag. Like, half of me is just so mad at this abuse of the technology terrorizing people. The other half of me is like,
well, it wasn't deliberate. It wasn't deliberate. It was an accident. And if it had been deliberate, it would have been the warning system. It would have been the sirens. It would have been news on the TV and radio. This was just a goof. It was a dumb goof, and it was not responded to in a timely fashion. The instant they realized that message had gone out, they should have immediately sent a second message saying, no, this was a false alarm. There is no threat. There is no missile. I mean, they were putting that up on the illuminated highway signs. There is no threat. But, I mean, people were sending text messages to their loved ones on the mainland saying we're about to die. I mean, it really did cause a lot of upset, and I can understand why the Emergency Management Agency is now getting death threats. I hope none of them are carried out. Anyway, Mateus, I got to let you go. Okay, going to let you go. It's time for me to get out of here. I got to take care of Claire now. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And we'll be back here tomorrow on Republic Broadcasting tomorrow. We'll see you then. Aloha, America.